I saw a tweet, maybe it was about Groundhog Day and the quarterback situation. It's going to go on for weeks and weeks, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, unless something happens this week, this is going to be an ongoing thing because it's a constant quest to upgrade at that position. And there are several other quarterbacks that they definitely pursue. If they don't get those, you're going to do this. And if it doesn't happen now, it's going to happen next year, which means we'll get a whole year of it. So, it could go on for a long time. And listen, it's been, as people pointed out to me after that tweet, this has been going on not months, but years.
John, was the Washington football team, were they caught by surprise by, like a lot of people I think were, by Stafford being dealt to the Rams? I mean, the Rams weren't a team that were being mentioned as far as being in the Stafford sweepstakes. Was Washington football team alarmed by that? What was their reaction?
I don't know if alarmed is the word. And the Rams were mentioned a day or two before the deal was done. So that became, once they were mentioned, it felt like this is something that's probably going to happen because it felt like it came out of left field, except for the fact that clearly Sean McVay was done with Jared Goff, at least in thinking that he could get them where they needed to go, because there's a lot of inconsistencies with him, details of the game. One game looks good with it, next game not. So, you knew that he, at that point, and we saw in the playoffs that he was done, so you knew that they may look to do something. You just thought that it would be hard to get rid of that contract. So once you saw that they were involved, to me that was like, oh, this is something definitely to watch. I think what they felt like was that they made a very competitive offer and would have given Detroit more capital right now. Part of the reason, what they also understand is that what the Rams gave them is future flexibility. And I think in a year where you have this pandemic impacted season, from the ability to scout the way you want, and the games played, et cetera, and then you have a new GM, coming in for the first time. I think the feeling was that he probably wanted to get his feet wet this year and then use those picks in future years to give them more maneuverability.
Do we know what the capital that the Washington football team, do we know the capital that they're willing to part with?
In that trade?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a first and a third. And I know there were some rumors about possible players.
Right.
I was told no players were involved.
Okay.
So if it's just a first and a third, it was, again, it gave them better, would have given Detroit better capital this year. Now, again, if there were players, I was told there weren't. So, we'll see.
So they were offering a first and a third. Were both of those picks in this year's draft?
I believe so. Definitely the first, yeah.
Yeah, the first, definitely. But if you're Detroit, okay, you're getting that first this year, but you're getting two number ones in the next 2 years, and you're getting a starting quarterback. That's the difference. You don't have to look for another quarterback. You can insert that guy right away. That's huge.
Yeah. Although you're strapped to his big contract.
Okay, well maybe
that's a negative.
Yeah, but at least you got one.
What he does is he gives them the ability to bypass a quarterback if the one they like isn't there at 7.
Right.
So he gives them, again, flexibility and can get you through the year, maybe 2 years before another guy is ready. Because I don't believe at all that they view him as now like, oh, we've got our guy to replace Matthew Stafford. I think it's as much a placeholder, and the reason why they were able to get another first-round pick is because they took on that contract. So whatever you see elsewhere, like that's the reason, and so like they were able to get more because of that. I don't think they look at that as, for the quarterback position, is now the problem is solved. But it does give them a legit start. Listen, he's a legit starting quarterback. Now, he's back end of the top 20 and maybe in that 20 to 25 range, but he is a starting quarterback in the NFL.
What does it tell you that Carr's coming off arguably his best career year? If you look overall at his numbers, just from a numbers perspective, they're reasonable. They're pretty darn good. If you had those numbers and you retired, you say, I had a damn good NFL career. And yet, Gruden not happy allegedly, and he wants to move on from him. What does that tell you? I've seen, I don't know him from seeing him other than Hard Knocks. He seems like a good kid. Like, I like him. He seems likable. What does that tell you about him?
Well, there are a couple things. One, first of all, we never know all going on behind the scenes, right? So that's number one. But, my understanding is that he liked what Carr did this year, and that the only guy, like, if you're, it's not as much about moving on from Carr as much as it is, can you get Deshaun Watson? I mean, who the hell isn't going to do that,
Right.
So I don't think, like, if they don't get Deshaun Watson, I don't think that they're making a move with Derek Carr.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not about, Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback. Derek Carr is not. And, so if you have that, now the question I would have for them is, are you better off with Carr and whatever else you get around him, or trading multiple picks and getting Deshaun, and maybe because you need help elsewhere too to get there. But it's a chance to get Deshaun Watson. We know that John Gruden, and somebody told me recently, it's like it just depends on what kind of mood he wakes up in the morning as far as what direction he wants to go. Sometimes with the quarterback. So, but I do think it's as much about, can you get Deshaun Watson? That's why I think there's now a lot of chatter about Carr because of a story yesterday in the Las Vegas paper, but it does seem like, well, first two things. One, the Raiders do have a cap issue. So you figure that either he or Mariota would be available because they have to cut a lot of cap. So that's one thing, but again, Deshaun Watson, but I don't think Watson's going to be available right now, so I don't know that this is even relevant. I don't know that they would trade him.
Here. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that they would trade him unless they, if some team wants to, I wouldn't give 2 first-round picks, but if some team does, then you can use that to go get Watson, but that just feels like too convenient or too easy. So I don't know that would happen, but that's why I think he's even being mentioned, is because if there's ability to get Deshaun Watson, if he becomes truly available, then you do it. I don't think that they would make that move if they don't think that Watson is available.
Jason told us the other day, he has friends, we all have little connections here and there. And so if Jason's heard this, I'm assuming you've heard it. He's heard that the people inside Redskins Park, whatever you call it now, they've been kind of targeting Carr. We had heard that like last week before all this came out. Had you heard that too?
I know that they like him. That's what I know. So, and I know that they're going to target several other quarterbacks. I know that. And Jack Del Rio had a really good relationship with him. That's going to carry weight. So, I think it certainly makes sense. And then it depends where if they go in that, if they went in that direction. And I think you certainly make calls on that. But if you're the Raiders, do you make any move unless Deshaun Watson's available? Because then, while Gruden likes Marcus Mariota, and we all, you can go back to his quarterback camp years ago when he was coming out, and I know he still likes him from what I've heard, but there's an injury history there. Can you trust him? So I don't know that you make that move unless you think you can do something else, or you're playing it, unless they just think that Mariota behind the scenes was just so much better for them. But yeah, Jack Del Rio and Carr had a really good relationship, which is my understanding, and certainly that would carry some weight here.
John, what's the intel on the other quarterbacks that they may be targeting outside of Carr? Do you want to give us a few names?
Yeah, give us a few nuggets.
Well, I don't know the names necessarily. I just think the obvious ones would be, if the Jets make Sam Darnold available, right?
Right.
Is that one? Then you're looking at free agents, and then seeing some of these cases, some of it is, well, what's Alex Smith going to do? And then it's like, how do you see these guys? Like, obviously Deshaun Watson would be one. Then with him, you're looking at a guy who's your franchise quarterback. With some of these others, like a guy like Darnold, it's like, okay, I know some people who really, really like him. Some other coaches in the NFL who really like him and feel like he still has a pretty high upside. So you could get a young guy with some mobility, which helps and has been in a crap situation. But if you don't go that route, I don't know. Like what I know is the guys who are free agents would be guys like Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston. those to me are placeholders, but they get you to a point where, Andy Dalton with this defense, you can win 10 games, right? And so but then you still have to resume that search for the guy, because if your goal is to get to the Super Bowl, anybody I've talked to is like, you need to get the quarterback, right? And I don't think that some of those guys would be like, okay, they might be an upgrade or more consistent, but they're not going to ultimately get you there. So you get through this year, keep building around them, keep building up the offense, and then try and strike again next year too. So this is, if they got someone like that, the quest is not over.
Right. I know we got a few weeks before free agency, but are you starting to hear some names that they might target in free agency other than the quarterbacks?
I think it's more positions, and here's the other thing. Like, they're meeting this week on going over personnel with Mayhew and Hurney, and then the staff. So a lot of those things will come out after this. Like, what do they think of their own guys? Finalizing their opinion on their own guys, and then okay, this is where you go from here. So like, receiver certainly is an area that you're going to target. Now having said that, this is a really good group of free agent receivers, but it's a great group of free agent or receivers in the draft. So do you have to go get one in free agency, or could you spend that elsewhere and then target one in the draft? And you could trade down that first pick and pick up a couple more, and you're still going to be okay finding a receiver if that's what you want, in addition to something else. So, but I think a lot of that will come out of the discussions this week.
Yeah. What does this say about Alex? Is this obvious then that the front office, sort of by these moves and poking around, obvious that they're going to move on from him, or are they going to try to bring him back at a reduced number? How do you ultimately, if you had to put your stones on the line here, John, how do you see this playing out?
He remains part of the options. So you have areas where we say, if you can get this guy, it's an upgrade, and they'll go that direction. If not, this is another option, which is, Alex Smith again, and then again continuing to build up around him, and then I think the question is, can he last 16 or 17 games and be effective? That's a question I think they still have to answer, and does anybody really know that? I think that injury at the end of the year concerns them. So I think, even though it's a quarterback, it's a normal injury, but it does concern him when you're coming off the situation he's in and the age he's at, et cetera. But can you then get through the season with a Smith, Heineke, Kyle Allen rotation, if that's what you do? Like, if something happens to Alex and one of those guys go in and maintain it, and then whatever. So can you get to 9 or 10 wins that way, again, while continuing to build up the rest of the roster? It's hard to know which direction it's going to go, because we just don't know this quarterback carousel where it's going to end, and who's going to be really jumping off it or getting traded. There could be, we're all thinking there's going to be a lot of movement, and at the end of the Jets don't have to trade Donald, and I know you talk to people there, and it's like, I think it's 60-40 that he would be back, right? So that might not happen. And then, if the Raiders don't do anything with Carr, then that's, another one. I think Mariota would be interesting, because, again, he's got $10 million and they need some cap room. So in the end, it could be that there's not as much movement, which means you may have to run it back with this same setup. But I think it certainly sounds like Smith, in the interviews he's done after the season, 60 Minutes, Rachel Ray, that he doesn't seem like a guy who's ready to retire. So
he wants to come back. He wants to come back.
Yep.
If he doesn't.
Yeah.
When you look at the UFAs for this team, obviously Sheriff, they want to get that deal done, I would assume. Kerrigan, Darby is a UFA, Dustin Hopkins.
Kerrigan's all but gone unless he gets no offers.
Do you see any of the Nick Sundberg's UFA? Besides Sheriff, do you think that there's guys that they should bring back, or are most of those guys going to be gone?
I think, first of all, a guy like Sundberg and Hopkins, Sundberg's been a steady force here for a while, right?
Yeah,
it's a very consistent player, and so, good guy to have around because of that. Hopkins with kickers, they're always a couple misses away from being on the street or being out of here. So even if you bring him back, he was inconsistent this year, too. Yeah, I don't know how like their job security is just at a different level than everybody else's. But I think as far as the big ones go, obviously Sheriff, they would like to resign, and he wants to be here. So I think that's a good pairing. Can they get it done? He's going to be in that 14, 15 million per year range, given where you look at the guard salaries right now. I think Ronald Darby is a guy that they would like back, and he wants to be back here. But again, money. And I don't know, I don't think the question on him was always durability, and he was very durable and he was good. But was he I think, did his play put him at a point where he's not affordable? I don't think so. I think he was very solid, but I don't know that anybody's going to say that he's a number one right now for them. So I think that helps them be able to retain him. And again, he wants to be here, and he did a solid job. So, that was all good for them. So, Kerrigan, you're right. He wants to go somewhere to start. That's not going to be here. And now, if no other team offers him that opportunity, and these guys say, well, you can still be a backup and rotate for Washington, then maybe that's what he looks at, but he still believes he can start, and so I think he's going to pursue that kind of an opportunity. But those are the big ones too, and those are the big ones.